top. Sup, internet? This is the Nintendo Advanced System released in 2001. In 2001, I was 7 years old. Let me tell you about life as a 7-year-old Nilesh. My family ran a care home, which they still do. And they lived in this care home, which they still do. It was, and still is, a mental care home. Here is an inaccurate graphical representation. Nilesh, what's it like living in a mental care home age 7? Aside from the screaming, the shouting, and the fear of a resident breaking into your room in the middle of the night and skinning you alive, the usual. Just because my family ran a business does not mean that we had money. And my parents had 2 kids. My sister being the age of 1, who doesn't really understand what the hell's happening, and me being 7, who really likes material possessions, as most 7-year-olds do. And if I conjured up the courage to ask for a material possession, it would be greeted by an ethnically delivered, "Hey, fuck off, no!" Nevertheless, I wanted a Game Boy Advance, which was over £100, which is a lot to spend on a 7-year-old in 2001. One day, my parents were in a good mood. They probably watched a solid 2001 movie, such as Shrek, Spy Kids, Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, Osmosis Jones. After watching Osmosis Jones, my parents were in a good mood, and I actually received a Game Boy Advance. Despite the fact that I was age 7, I understood that money was not easy to come by. I was like, holy fucking shit. This is the coolest thing I've ever bloody come into, and it will be the coolest thing I ever touched in my entire life. For all I knew at 7 years old, this was the pinnacle of technology, which we may never surpass. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I am thoroughly enjoying my Game Boy Advance, despite the fact that I cannot find the key to surpass the locked door in Army Men Advance, which is a terrible game. One of the residents in the care home have a family visiting them, which is fucking unheard of. Side note, if you have put someone in care, please visit them more than you currently are. Cheers. This family have a kid called James who was about my age, so I'm like, hey James, you want to come hang out in my room and see my roadmap carpet and my astronaut wallpaper, and also there's a slug that lives in the corner of our room, his name is George. And James is like, yeah, alright. So I hang out with James, and James had a Game Boy Color. I didn't know what Game Boy Color was, but I showed him my Game Boy Advance, and him being a typical butthurt white boy said, mine's better than yours. But I didn't care because my Game Boy was my Game Boy, so fuck you, James. So 7-year-old me was very happy to be hanging around with someone my own age. You know, I made a friend. Or did I? After James and his family leave, I suddenly realised I cannot find my purple 2001 Game Boy Advance. I'm 7, it hasn't really fully occurred to me that a kid has come to my house and taken my shit. It's more likely that I've left it in the fridge. After literally looking in every nook and cranny of the 3-story care home, I'm like, shit, I have to tell my parents. So I tell my parents, and they're like, no, you probably lost it because you're a twat. And I'm like, I am a twat, but I've looked everywhere. And they're like, are you sure? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, shit. My parents probably couldn't believe it, just the idea that a client's kid came to our house and took something of ours. My parents were not ready to accuse a client's child of being a thief, and they couldn't afford to buy me another Game Boy. So that was that. I lost the Game Boy, and I couldn't get it back, age 7. Never really saw James again. He'd be in his 20s by now, just like I am, probably worrying about all the grown-up stuff that we have to do. It happened 16 years ago, and he's very likely to be a completely different person. So James, wherever you are, I hope you don't feel guilty about what you did 16 years ago, because it's fine. I can accept that it was the past, and you've probably grown up to be a much better person, and I'd just like to say, you're a massive twat. You probably have a twat girlfriend who would make an excellent twat wife, and you'll impregnate the twat and have little twat babies, and your little twat babies will grow up to be little twat children and probably steal other children's iPhone 19s Pluses. And just like you, they'll be born a twat, live their lives as a twat, and die as a twat. The joke's on you, James, because my outdated material possession has been replaced, and it only took 16 years. Internet, you might say there's no moral to this story, and I would say, hey, fuck off, no! The moral of this story is, don't trust white people. Side note, on this YouTube website doohickey that is obviously falling apart over time and making creators very mad, I'm just gonna do whatever the hell I want and not worry about the complexities of who wants to see what. Resident Evil 7 is coming out soon, and I will likely make a gameplay, because I am capable of making a gameplay, so why not? Also, follow me on Twitter at Mr. neenaw. Subscribe and click the bell, because the bell means if I make something at my end, you'll receive it on the bell end. You're welcome. Farewell, Internet. Farewell.